New York Giants general manager Joe Shane has, on at least two different occasions, wanted us to believe that the roster is really not that far off, save for a few moves that need to be made. But is the roster really that far off? I give you my biggest concern about the New York Giants roster coming up next on the Locked on Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked on Giants podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Tran, a credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked on Giants podcast. And on today's show, I got to thinking last night when I was just winding down for the day about things that Joe Shane, the general manager, has said about this roster. And one thing that kind of popped up into my head when I was, writing down notes for today is he has said in the past that he doesn't believe that the roster is that far off. Well, I'm going to give you a concern that I have about the roster, which kind of contradicts, I think, what Joe Shane has been trying to say or trying to have us believe. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we will talk about some sneaky draft needs, or actually sneaky position needs for the Giants, positions that really aren't getting a lot of airplay, if you will, but really need to be. And I'll tell you what they are and why they should be being talked about a lot more than what they have been. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about Matthew Stafford, the Los Angeles Rams quarterback, who may or may not become available in a trade, depending on what happens on his contract. Now, I've seen a lot of people say to me, what would be the incentive for Matthew Stafford to come here? Why would the Giants go and get him? And what would they give up? And does it pay to, not draft a quarterback? I'm going to answer all that for you in the third segment of today's show. So that's our agenda for today. Welcome on in again to everybody. All right, let me start off with what Joe Shane had to say and why I'm still not totally convinced. So Joe Shane, in trying to maybe justify the job that has been done so far under his watch, pointed to the offense. He pointed to the fact that, they've got Malik Neighbors, they've got Theo Johnson. They sort of fixed the offensive line. The offensive line is not totally, up to stuff just yet. Really, they have Tyrone Tracy Jr. They don't have the quarterback, obviously. That's going to be like priority number one, I think, this offseason. And defensively, they have Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Micah McFadden, Bobby Okereke, Tyler Newman in the secondary, Deontay Banks in the secondary. So a lot of good young pieces in the estimation of Joe Shane. But there's a couple of things that I'm concerned about with the state of the roster. And that is, you can put together a foundation that is going to fit like a hand in glove, or it's going to be just a collection of pieces that maybe don't complement each other. And here, what I mean by that is, for those of you who've ever been to East Rutherford, you have probably seen that eyesore in the parking lot that is known, I think, right now as the American Dream. And that is a great example or a parallel that I can make with what I think about the Giants roster right now. You look at that eyesore when it was first being built. And basically, it looked like they slapped together different types of material, different colors. It had no rhyme or reason. It was just pieces that they threw together to build a structure. And when I look at this Giants roster, I almost see the same thing. It's like they've got some good young talent, but do they have it to the point where it's now starting to shape the roster, shape an identity, shape a direction? I don't know that it is. And, when I look at it, yes, there are some good players on here, but I look at the future. Yes, because look, roster building is not just about this year. It's got to be about the year after and the year after that. And I'm not so sure I see a lot of guys who maybe are coming up for contract extensions that you could sit there and say, okay, yeah, this guy's definitely going to be back. This guy definitely needs to be part of the future. Now, what I mean by that is looking at the state of the cap for an article I did on New York Giants on SI, I went to look at which players could Joe Schoen theoretically extend right now, similar to what he did with, with Dexter Lawrence, what he did with Andrew Thomas a couple years ago. Folks, I can only find really two. All right, one of which is Jermaine Illuminor, the offensive tackle, who's going to be 32 by the time his contract ends. The other one, Micah McFadden, inside linebacker. That's it. And I'm not so sure that's a good thing. We talk about all the leadership that is bled out of this locker room, and with it, the identity that this team was trying to build. And right now, I look at the Giants and the way they're constructed. And yes, there are good pieces, good, players that they have. But I see almost, for lack of a better comparison, the eyesore when I looked at, the American Dream when it was known as Xanadu, when it was first being built. Just a collection of pieces. And what do you have there? What are you going to build on? What's your foundation? What direction are you going to take it on? Are you going to be on defense? Are you going to be a run stopping defense, a pass rushing terror on offense? Are you going to be a pound and ground type of offense? You're going to be a pass, try to be the greatest show on turf. What are you going to be? And I don't know that they, have the pieces together to where they can say, okay, this is what we've started. This is what we need to build upon. And that to me would be a bit of a concern because, you could bring in all the good players you want. And I always go back to the Philadelphia Eagles years ago. I don't know if you guys remember, but when the Eagles put together the so-called Dream Team, it was basically a fantasy football collection of, a dream for a fantasy football enthusiast. All these big name players, and they just didn't fit together as a team, And I think sometimes you look at some of the winning teams that are out there and you say, what's more important? To have a collection of individuals who can, break open games, take over games, or a collection of guys that blend together and give you a solid foundation that can be consistent week in and week out. And I go back to 2007 and 2011 because I like to, obviously those are the last two championship teams the Giants had. And you know what? Other than maybe, for a handful of guys here and there, 2007's team was basically a collection of guys that complemented each other. Same thing you could say for 2011. There weren't like a galore of superstars on the roster. It's just, everybody kind of fed into each other. And I don't know that the Giants really have that right now. Could they build it up this offseason? Absolutely. And will they? I do believe Joe Schoen is going to look to do it. But I just, the roster, to say that it's close, what is it close to? I'm not sure it's really close to anything right now. And, not unless you have a blueprint or an identity or a direction that you want to go in that goes beyond, oh, we want to be, we want to win games. Well, yeah, everybody wants to win games, but how are you going to get there? And I just don't think the Giants have that. And that to me would be something of a concern if I'm being honest with you. Now, again, we'll see what Schoen does this offseason. He's got to basically get this team back on track, as does Brian Daboll, who's going to have a hand in it. But, to say that this team is close, could they be a playoff contender next year? I suppose. Do I think they will? Based on how I feel right now with the way things have gone and, my study of their salary cap situation and just the needs. I don't know. I think at this point, if you want to be optimistic, you probably want to say that, they could definitely win more than 3 games. But even that's not guaranteed. So we'll just have to see how that all plays out. So, all right, coming up next, sneaky needs on this Giants roster. We know about the quarterback situation. We know about cornerback. I'm going to give you a few more, and I'm going to tell you why they're a sneaky need right after this. Hey, Giant fans, as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5 o'clock. Your business is always on your mind, which means that when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. No wonder why 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. So go on and post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are just chugging right along here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Shows 5 days a week. We don't take our break until June, and even when we get to June, we might not take a break because there's always going to be something to talk about in the land of the Giants. And on today's show, of course, we just got done talking about the state of the roster and the kind of the direction it's headed. In this segment, I want to talk about sneaky draft needs, or actually not necessarily draft needs, personnel needs, whether it's addressed via the draft, whether it's addressed, in free agency. These are some sneaky roster needs that, I think if you look at the grand picture, they're maybe not as high on the list of priorities, but they are needs that should probably be addressed if the opportunity is there. So I'm going to start off with tight end. All right. Now, the Giants have a good young tight end in Theo Johnson. Daniel Bellinger has kind of, dropped out of favor. He initially started out as a guy who was intriguing, but over the last couple of years, he's kind of taken a back seat, first to Darren Waller, now to Theo Johnson. Bellinger is entering the final year of his contract this year. And I got to think that, given how things have gone for him, he might not be in the team's long plan. So you have Theo Johnson, obviously, who's going to be your starter for the next several years. They had this guy, Greg Dulcich, who they picked up late last year off waivers. I don't know if he's necessarily in the future. The tight end class, from what I understand, is pretty good this year. So if I'm the Giants, I maybe look to get a day 3 guy to complement Theo Johnson down the line. And maybe, if everything works out, my 3 tight ends for the year turn out to be Johnson, the draft pick, and Bellinger. And maybe, I move Dulcich to practice squad and see if we can't, continue to develop him a little bit further. So, tight end, I think, is definitely going to be a need because, look, the Giants, they really don't have a big-bodied red zone threat. And that's been missing on this offense. So I think they really need to look into, adding to that group, whether, Johnson's going to be that guy or maybe they want to have a couple guys that do it, whatever the case may be. They haven't had that, and they need to get it, in my opinion. Running back is obviously a sneaky need. Now, this year, Tyrone Tracy, obviously RB1. Devin Singletary has kind of bumped down to RB2. He is under contract for this year, has guaranteed money, so he will be on the roster. Beyond this year, though, won't be there. So behind them, you have Eric Gray, who is still kind of a mystery, still trying to find a niche for himself. I really don't think he's that good of a kickoff returner to make a living on that. You've got Dante Miller, who maybe steps up and becomes that guy, but, I need to see a little bit more. Look, this is a historically deep running backs class. You can get a good prospect on day 3. And the last thing I want to see the Giants do is make the same mistake as they made last year with the quarterback class by passing up talent in this particular position group, right? When you have a deep class, if you're not dipping into that deep class, then what are we doing? All right. I think it would be a mistake if they pass on a running back. I think you get a guy in here, like I said, you've got Tracy, you've got Singletary, let them do the heavy lifting while the young kid acclimates. Pass blocking is the biggest position, or the biggest role, I should say, of the position that a young running back needs to acclimate to at the NFL level. So give them an opportunity to develop in that area. So this way, when they move on from Singletary after this year, this coming year, 2025, now you have an RB2 waiting in the wings. And that, by the way, talking about talent waiting in the wings, that's been another big problem with this Giants, the way the Giants have built up the roster. If you go down the different positions that they have had, how many can you honestly say that they have had a guy waiting in the wings who was fully developed, ready to step in and just seize the bull by the horn, so to speak? Not very often, which is why they've had to go out and get free agents or trade for guys or whatnot. And that's something else, by the way, that is a concern about the roster. The depth on this team is just not where it needs to be, in my opinion. And that's something that has to change. All right. Got off track a little bit there. Sneaky draft needs or sneaky personnel needs. Obviously, offensive line. All right. That kind of goes with what I was just saying, actually, about not having quality depth to step up when you need it, whether it be because of injury or because of performance or because the guy left. Last year, the Giants' offensive line, according to NFL Pro, had the sixth highest quarterback pressure rate, 37.8% of the time. Now, in the beginning of the season, that wasn't the case because they had their starters in there. But once the injuries started piling up, they didn't have the depth to step in and fill the roster spots. And that is something that needs to be addressed. Now, I do think interior-wise, they have some guys. Jake Kubas last year was intriguing enough to, I think, where he's going to get more of a look. But offensive tackle, who do they have? They've got Andrew Thomas. They've got Jermaine Illuminor. Who do they have after him? Evan Neal. He's not really a tackle. I think he moves to guard. So they've got to address the offensive line. If they don't address the offensive line a second year in a row, as far as I'm concerned, that whole staff should be fired on the spot because there's just no excuse not to do that. I don't think they will make that mistake twice. I hope they don't make that mistake twice. But stranger things have happened. Safety is probably a sneaky need, you could say, because, if they don't re-sign Jason Pinnock, and I don't think that they will, to be honest with you, you're going to be left with Tyler Nubin, Dane Belton, all right? I don't think they're going to bring back Isaiah Simmons. So you could probably use another safety for depth, I would think. So that's a sneaky need. Another sneaky need, wide receiver. You lose Darius Slayton. Who's your wide receiver two? Right? Is it going to be Wan'Dale Robinson? I don't think it should be. No disrespect to Wan'Dale, but, I don't know that I would necessarily target him as much as he was targeted last year because he does have his limitations. I would want a bigger bodied guy cut from the same mold as Darius Slayton, but with maybe, a little bit more firepower to his game than what Slayton has had. So that is a need. So yeah, the Giants have a lot of sneaky needs that have to be addressed. And here's the scary thing when you talk about the roster, and that is they're not going to be able to fill all these needs in one offseason. It just doesn't happen. If you have a few needs, then maybe you can make the case that, we just need this, this, and this. 3 things, we can fill them. Giants have a lot, and I mean a lot of needs, to where now they've got to prioritize, okay, what do we attack first, and what do we feel we can live with another year? And that's why, when you look at this roster objectively, and I don't mean to sound like a downer, you look at it objectively and you just hope that it's going to be better than last year. But, as far as being a deep playoff contender, assuming they even get to the playoffs, I think that's stretching it. I really do. I mean, I'm just being honest with you guys. I could sit here and sugarcoat this for you. I could sit here and be, a cheerleader. You guys have eyes and ears. You guys have brains. I have too much respect for you guys and gals out there to sit here and tell you that everything's going to be fine when I myself have some questions about the direction the franchise is headed into. But as I always say, I hope I'm wrong in this case, because if I am, hey, I'll admit it, I'll own it, and I'll sit there and I'll celebrate with the rest of you. Because as I say all the time, much easier to cover a winning team than it is a team that loses week after week after week. Because look, there's only so many different ways you could say that a team is bad or that a team is lacking before the topic starts to wear thin. So, all right, coming up next, Matthew Stafford has been suddenly rumored to go to the Giants, even though Matthew Stafford of the Rams is still under contract to the Rams. And there is still a possibility that he and the Rams could maybe work out their contract differences. But we'll play devil's advocate. We'll talk about what if when it comes to Matthew Stafford. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you could stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. The app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit fanduel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking to join an exclusive community of Big Blue Faithful where you can discuss the team and receive inside information in a toxic-free environment, then you need to check out the Locked On Giants Blue Crew community. Members get access to our exclusive by invitation only Discord channel where we can talk about with one another, ask questions, get breaking news, and so much more. Plus, as part of the Locked On Giants Blue Crew, I text exclusive updates and info directly to your phone, and you can communicate with me via text one-on-one. So come on, see what it's all about with a free 14-day trial. And when you use our promo code Blue Crew, you will get your first 2 months after your free 14-day trial ends at 50% off the regular monthly price, which is $4.99 per month. If you don't like the service, just cancel before the trial ends and owe absolutely nothing. For more information or to register, visit joinsubtext.com/LockedOnNYGiants. And that promo code to enter at the top of the screen is Blue Crew, BLUECREW, to get your 2-month discount after your 14-day trial ends. Texting data rates may apply. Please see your carrier's plan for details. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we'll be back tomorrow, obviously, with another show. Topic to be determined. I'm still trying to figure out what topic to do. But, look, we're getting close to the combine, so there's going to be plenty to talk about in the coming days and weeks. And, I'm also trying to get another draft guest, a draft analyst on the program. So I'm working on that. Hopefully, I'll be able to pull that off next week. Still to be determined, though. But I'm working on something for you. So, all right. I want to talk a little bit about Matthew Stafford because, look, ever since the Giants reportedly hired Chad Hall, who is Matthew Stafford's brother-in-law, the rumor mill has picked up that the Giants are going to try and make a trade for Matthew Stafford. And I just want to talk about that for a moment here. And, I've seen a lot of people on social media say, well, why would Matthew Stafford want to come here? Why would the Giants do that? Why would they give up assets? Does it make sense? Yada, yada, yada. Let's break this down. All right. First off, Matthew Stafford, if he reaches a new contract agreement with the Rams, all bets are off. The topic is a moot point. If he does not, the Rams are going to want to trade him. And I would be absolutely shocked if the Rams don't ask for a first-round pick. Now, right off the bat, those of you who are big on getting a quarterback for the Giants, you're probably saying, why trade a first-round pick when you can potentially use that on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders? I get that. But here's the thing that I would say you need to consider. Can you sit there and honestly say that Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is definitely going to be a can't miss product for the Giants if they take him, or for any team for that matter. I don't think you can. The Giants are in a situation right now, unfortunately, because of their own, mistakes and whatnot, where they have to win games in 2025 if Shane and Dable are to keep their jobs. Their strategy, as I see it, needs to be they have got to get an accomplished quarterback who has a history of winning games, has a history of, fourth quarter comebacks. Somebody, they're Kerry Collins, as I like to say. That's what they need to get, regardless of what they do with the draft. And by the way, I do think they will do veteran and they will, draft a quarterback. I think they will double dip. But, if they do make a trade for Matthew Stafford, that means they're almost certainly going to have to give up a number one pick. And that's where, you need to ask yourself, okay, is Matthew Stafford at this point in his career, is he better and more accomplished than what they would be getting in either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, to where, Stafford can come in here, play for 2-3 years or whatever. And then the Giants, if they don't get their franchise guy this year, try again next year when the class is going to be a little deeper. That's the question the Giants need to ask themselves if Stafford becomes available. When we talk about, trading away assets, as much as I think they're gold and, you don't do it unless you absolutely have to because you have an opportunity of getting a guy who can make a difference. The question you need to ask yourself is what you're giving up and what would have been available at that spot. Is that better than what you would stand to acquire in the veteran market? And if you could say, yes, it's better, then, you go with the draft pick. If you could say, no, it's not better, you go with the veteran. So that being said, I could see the Giants maybe kicking the tires on the trade if Stafford becomes available. Now, some of you are saying, well, why would Stafford want to come here? He's 37 years old. He likes it in LA. The Giants are rebuilding and they're not very good. Why would any veteran quarterback want to come here? Well, first off, money. Obviously, that's the obvious answer. But here's the other thing that I think a lot of people are maybe selling guys like Stafford short. These guys are competitors. They are proud competitors. What better way to come to really boost your ego than to say, okay, you know what? The Giants haven't had good quarterback play in the last, 5.5, 6 years. I'm going to come in and I'm going to show them what it's all about. What's to say that doesn't drive a guy? It can. Even, what's to say that, he doesn't look at what the Giants have on offense and say, ooh, Malik Neighbors, yeah, I got to, be a part of that connection. Tyrone Tracy, having him behind me, that's a benefit. There are reasons why I could see, a veteran quarterback wanting to come here, besides the fact that, yes, Joe Shane and Brian Dable are on shaky ground right now. Besides the fact that the Giants' offensive line needs to be built up more. Besides the fact that the Giants have not been a very good franchise. So don't necessarily rule out that because the Giants have been a mess these last several years, that a veteran like Matthew Stafford might not want to come here. I think if he has an opportunity to come and, continue his career and show that he hasn't lost anything, why wouldn't he? Russell Wilson had a flirtation with the Giants last year. And the only reason why that didn't work out is because Russell Wilson was not assured that he was going to have a fair shot at competing for the job. That, the decision was basically once Daniel Jones was healthy and recovered from his ACL, he was going to be the guy. Well, who wants to hear that if you're a veteran? You want to hear that you're going to have a legitimate chance to compete to win a starting job. And if you're not getting that, then why would you want to go to a franchise? And obviously, the Giants are in a position right now where it's not like they're going to say, okay, you've got to compete with Tommy DeVito and, a potential rookie that we don't even know if we're going to have. No, I think those of you who are saying that the Giants quarterback position is, not as attractive for a veteran, I think you're selling it a little short. But, everybody, there might be some guys that just don't feel that the organization is the right place to go. We'll have to see. Obviously, can the Giants be competitive money-wise? That's going to be a factor, certainly. And, what kind of sales pitch are they going to give to a potential starting quarterback? That's all going to factor in. But here's the thing I'll leave you with, folks. The Giants better have a good idea what they're going to do in the draft before free agency starts, because that's going to tell us a lot of what the Giants maybe think about this draft class at quarterback. And by that I mean is if they do somehow decide they're going to trade for Matthew Stafford and they give up assets, that tells us right there that they're pretty much going to lean on that, on Stafford for the next year or two, and that maybe they look to draft a quarterback on day 3 with the hopes that he develops. But, as far as finding the next Eli, that may have to wait, depending again on what happens in the draft. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the program. Be sure if you missed any of our episodes this week, you check it out. I had a couple guests on. I had David Syverson of Our Lads. He was on yesterday. Nick Baumgartner of The Athletic was on. Going back to last week, we had Cherian Williams and Gary Myers, both Hall of Fame voters. So we had a bunch of guests on over the last week and a half or so. Check it all out if you do have time. And otherwise, I will see you tomorrow, Giant fans.